Wales, there's a fair amount of cloud in the sky likely, but a few bright spells here and there. A scattering of light showers is also likely. Maybe one or two heavier showers across the Midlands. They'll be moving quite swiftly though with that brisk northwesterly breeze. It's going to feel fresher with temperatures around 19 Celsius. Yorkshire and North East England are going to see increasing amounts of showers, some quite heavy by the middle of the day. The odd rumble of thunder can't be ruled out, especially further to the north. Some more general rain, again heavy, perhaps quite thundery at times, will be pushing south through southern Scotland this lunchtime. There will be some brighter skies though that should follow on from the north. For most of Northern Ireland, it's a much drier prospect this lunchtime compared to yesterday. Still a few showers to dodge, and it's feeling quite cool with temperatures of just 16 Celsius in Belfast. So the chance of further showers for many parts of the UK for the rest of the afternoon should become drier into the evening. That's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good morning. Some technical issues this morning, but the time is 10 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright and I'll keep you up to date. So, MPs are warning the greatest staffing crisis in NHS history is creating a serious risk to patient safety. The Health and Social Care Committee says research shows the health service is short of 12,000 doctors and 50,000 nurses and midwives. It also warns the government has no decisive strategy to help. NHS Dr Anita Raja told us the problem is years in the making.
This is not something that has happened overnight. This has been going on for years on end, decades and decades, but nobody has been taking this seriously. I mean, we've come up with different recruitment techniques, taking people from abroad, but the problem is not recruitment, the problem is retention.
The final two candidates to become Prime Minister will face their first televised head-to-head debate tonight. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been trading blows over immigration, China and tax cuts over the weekend. The Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are vowing to toughen controls on migration. Education Secretary James Cleverly told GB News he supports Liz Truss and that she's capable of making tough decisions.
I've seen how she's worked as Foreign Secretary. I've seen how she's conducted herself on the world stage. I've seen how she's taken long-standing, consistent positions on China, for example, on making the most of the fact we've left the European Union. I think that Liz has got an outstanding track record over many, many years on some of the issues that are facing the country today, and I really hope she has the opportunity to explain those fully.
She's got all the features we need from somebody who can beat Labour in the next election, which is crucial, of course. Is a genuine, authentic Brexiteer. That's the most important thing right now. I think we need somebody who understands Brexit, who campaigned for Brexit, and somebody who can make the most of it, because I think there's a world of opportunity out there. Rishi's proven himself time and time again over the last 2 years, dealing with two huge crises in this country. First of all, the COVID crisis, and now the cost of living crisis. I think he's got the intellect and the ideas and the ability to innovate and implement.
MP Kevin Hollinrake, who's backing Rishi Sunak. Now, ferry passengers travelling to France are being advised to arrive at least 2 hours before their scheduled departure. The ferry operator.
There are lovely parts of the UK, of course, and those I think will be looking increasingly attractive. Very simply, if you are doing a really sensible thing with the cost of living crisis, and putting everybody in the car and just going camping in France, then you're probably going to want to look at something like Newhaven to Dieppe, or one of the crossings from Portsmouth or Plymouth, because there all the controls are on the French side, so there's never going to be a hold-up like this.
A very good morning. This is To The Point. I'm Mercy Morency, and I'm pleased to be joined this morning by Alex Phillip, who hopefully you'll recognise if you're a regular. You can find us as ever on your TV, radio and online, and we're here with you for 2 hours. Here's what's coming up today.
Yeah, as Prime Ministerial hopefuls, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss gear up for another TV debate tonight. We'll look into how each candidate will address the issue of illegal immigration. How do they plan to deal with the boat crossings, and do their plans even stack up? We'll examine that next.
Yes, and Alex will actually be giving her personal views on this in just a moment, so stay tuned for that as well. And in other news, those who are looking to take a legal route across the Channel to France this weekend were faced with hours of delays at the port of Dover. We're going to speak to a Dover councillor later on to get to the heart of that issue.
And finally, the World Health Organization has declared monkeypox a, quote, public health emergency of international concern, just like they did for the coronavirus in January 2020. So what does this mean? We'll speak to pathologist Dr. Claire Craig to get you the answers you need.
Yes, that and more is coming up over the next hour. Of course, we are here until midday as well. And remember, we read out your views throughout our show every day. So get them in. You can get them in at GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, Alex gives her views on the battle over migrant rights.
Well, first, it was to cut or not to cut tax. Now, it's the doomed Rwanda plan. The battle royale to be our next Prime Minister has entered the realms of migration. Both sides have been lumbered with the populist hot potato crowd pleaser and know they've got to keep it, lest exile themselves to the outer skirts of Christendom in the right-wingathon to snatch the jangling keys to number 10. And yet, having watched the government spend untold sums on basically getting 2 sets of taxpayer-funded lawyers to battle it out, while only one wretched soul sat on a doomed jumbo glued to a runway, you can only assume that when Truss and Sunak both promised to crack down on illegal migration, Rishi will be taking flying lessons and Liz will be doing the next hustings from a heavily armed rib in the English Channel. Building more processing centres? Rapidly ramping up Home Office staff? Bolstering the forces to hunt down the human trafficking gangs? Nah, that'd be all too sensible. And only sensational makes headlines.
Yeah, you've spoken quite a lot about the efficacy of this Rwanda plan, and you're quite sceptical about whether it will work. You think it's actually just a bit of a distraction tactic almost, to distract from the fact that they actually don't have a plan.
You know, I wish I could tell you the lottery numbers. I can't. But as soon as this story made the very first headline, I think I said in one of my monologues, you can predict what's going to follow. You're going to have the NGOs, you're going to have the lawyers. And I said it'll be very unlikely that even one person will end up on that plane or the plane would even take off. And there you have it. It all came to pass.
I think we've already spent something million.
We've given 120 mil to Rwanda already.
Yeah, we've spent tens of millions, basically, trying to even get this plan off the ground. So I do find it slightly odd that the current two, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, are saying, I'm going to crack on with this plan and I'm going to expand it even more. Well, we need to actually get it working first.
Yeah, well, it's a popularity contest, isn't it? At the end of the day, and you know, they think it's a very popular plan. That's why it was drawn up. It gave them all the right reasons to point the finger of blame in every other direction but themselves.
Well, let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Do you think Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss's plans for the Rwanda plan to expand it are actually very feasible, given that we haven't actually managed to get it off the ground yet? Let us know. But to our top story today, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will go head-to-head for the first time in a leadership debate tonight.
Yeah, over the weekend, the two indeed did clash over immigration as both launched plans to protect the UK's borders. Liz Truss promised to sign more Rwanda-style schemes with more African countries, while Rishi Sunak vowed to cap the number of migrants able to enter the UK.
Yes, well, the focus today is expected to be on the NHS as well. I'm going to get told off now, aren't I, for saying H instead of H, as I always do, after a damning report from the Commons Committee revealed the health service is facing its worst ever staffing crisis across many professions, that is, so midwives, doctors, everything. This is the worst we are facing now.
Yeah, our political correspondent Tom Harwood is with us in the studio. Tom.
Yes. Do you have a question?
Yeah, no. Well, we're talking about the NHS. I mean, it's in pretty dire straits, isn't it? And this report by the Health Committee, chaired, of course, by Jeremy Hunt, I mean, it tells us what we already know, massive chronic understaffing, and the shortfall that we need to build up over the course of the next decade or two is just incredible.
It certainly is. I mean, the pressures that we've seen, even before the pandemic, they were considerable. A lot of money then went in to the NHS, of course, the largest cash injection that the organisation has ever had. But then, of course, the pandemic and those 2 years of delays of backlogs have really piled on the pressure again. And let's not forget the inflation crisis that's sweeping the country. It's not just affecting individuals, it's also affecting government agencies. The services that the NHS needs to buy are now more expensive too, as well as a shortfall in the number of staff who can work there. So some really long-term issues as well as some short-term ones. And one of the things that Jeremy Hunt has been saying today is that it takes 7 years to train a new medical practitioner. So the idea that this could be solved immediately is frankly for the birds. What there needs to be is a long-term settlement in terms of delivering more staff, more training, more capacity. The fundamental problem, though, with our electoral cycles is that politicians don't tend to like this long-term planning. Putting in investment now for reward that won't be seen for the best part of a decade isn't at the top of politicians' interest. So there does need to be more grown-up thinking in this area.
And Jeremy Hunt, of course, the chair of the Health Select Committee in Parliament, he's supporting Rishi Sunak to become the next Prime Minister. Let's talk a bit about what we can expect to hear from Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss later on when they go head-to-head. Do they intend, do you think, to come up with these big plans to solve the issues we're seeing today, whether it's issues of travel, immigration, or issues of the NHS?
Yes, I think we're going to see a more policy-focused debate tonight. We remember back just over a week ago to that ITV debate where there seemed to be a lot of personality scraps and it got a very sort of blue-on-blue affair. No doubt there'll be some of that tonight, but clearly the candidates will be wanting to show that they're talking more about the issues and less potentially about each other. I think there was a broad sense within the Conservative Party that there was that sort of debate was not doing the Conservative Party any favours. It's one of the reasons why the Sky News debate was then cancelled after both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak pulled out of that debate following the level of blue on blue. So I think that's one key thing to look out for. And the other thing, of course, to look out for is this change versus continuity dichotomy, really, where Rishi Sunak, to some extent, it's funny because he was the person that many people blame for calling this entire leadership election. His resignation really precipitated the fall of Boris Johnson. But in the same way, he's also talking about continuing managing the economy in the way that he was before, continuing many of the policies and much of the manifesto that the government was elected on in the first place. Meanwhile, almost counterintuitively, Liz Truss was the person that stuck by Boris to the end, didn't resign as Foreign Secretary, but is now saying that more things need to change, is now saying that the economic policy of the last 20 years needs a fundamental rethink. So there's that really interesting dichotomy really there. Someone who wanted to break with Boris Johnson but continue his policies, and someone who wanted to continue with Boris Johnson but break from his policies. So it'll be interesting to see how that circle can be squared.
Yeah, a lot of this to come over the next few weeks. It'll be keeping you busy, what will otherwise be a quiet summer in politics. Tom, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Now let's go to Joe Twyman, who's the co-founder and director of the polling firm Delta Poll, who joins us now. Good morning, Joe. It's been interesting seeing the various contenders sort of deploying polling from all sorts of companies to put themselves as the favourite. But we are now seeing reliable polling between these two, Truss and Sunak. And it does look like Truss is actually ahead, both in the general public and amongst Conservative Party members. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on where you look at it and which questions you ask. Certainly among Conservative Party members, this most important constituency that's up and coming, you're right, Mercy, they do indeed seem to be leaning towards Truss. It's around about sort of 60-40 at the moment, which is close to the margin of victory that we've seen in previous membership contests the Conservative Party have run. They don't tend to be a close-run thing, when indeed they do take place. Among the general public, the situation is more complicated. The reason it's more complicated is that a lot of people still say they don't know, and that's really understandable, given that for many people out there, they will not have heard of Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. They might not know much about them. If anything, they do know it's likely to be one or two things. And certainly neither of the candidates has been subjected to the kind of scrutiny or indeed the kind of airtime that they're up against at the moment and will be for the next few weeks. And so at the moment, when you ask the general public which candidate they prefer, it's Rishi Sunak who wins out just, but with a large number of people who say don't know. Then when you ask those people who say they don't know if they were forced to choose who they would go to, essentially the result becomes neck and neck. But of course, there's the difference between the general public and the Conservative supporters, whether it's people who support the Conservatives at the moment or people who voted for the Conservatives in 2019. Among both those groups, again, once you remove the don't knows, Liz Truss is ahead, but it's not by much. And so certainly at the moment, with so much still to go, it's all to play for.
I mean, the electorate has already taken place really among MPs who picked the last two, and now it goes to Conservative membership. But a lot of people will be casting this forward when the electorate is the general public and how either of those candidates might fare in a general election. And the ghost of Boris seems to be haunting this campaign, with a general feeling that actually neither of them pass muster when it comes to filling his boots.
Yeah, one of the paradoxes of this whole process is that when you ask the general public, but also when you ask these key Conservative groups, whether it's Conservative supporters or former Conservative voters or Conservative voters at the moment, when you ask them who they think should take hold of the Prime Minister's job, then yes, they say Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, but it's evenly divided. When you ask them whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that Boris Johnson resigned, more people in all cases say it was a good thing that he resigned than a bad thing. But when you then repeat the question about who would be the best leader, Boris Johnson comes top if you include him. So we can conclude from that both the general public and many within the Conservative Party supporting ranks believe that, yes, on balance, it was a good thing that Boris Johnson did leave, but they remain very unconvinced by any of the people to replace him.
And in leaving aside sort of the characters and the individuals themselves, what issues are people saying they want to be hearing about when it comes to who is going to be the next leader? Because we know they're going head-to-head a bit later on today. What are the top issues at the moment?
Well, again, it depends on which group you're talking to. If you're talking to the general public and Conservative voters, then it's very much the cost of living. That is the most important issue facing the country. It's the most important issue facing people and their families. But if you focus just on the constituency that's actually important in the short term, those Conservative members, they say the most important issue is simply winning the next general election, but of course you would expect that. But then below that, you see talk of immigration being the next most important issue, followed by the cost of living, followed by Britain's place in the world post-Brexit. And so it's immigration, if you like, of those three that is the most important. And it doesn't surprise me, given that both candidates will be doing their own polling, it doesn't surprise me that that's what drove the headlines this morning in the papers, all the discussion about what they're going to do about immigration, or at least what they claim they're going to do. And I imagine that will play a big part in the debate tonight.
Yeah, Joe, thank you so much for coming on the programme. Joe Twyman, who is the director of the polling firm Delta Poll. Do you know what really strikes me? You know, when we had this sort of 8 of them all in the running, there were people in there that really excited the nation. Yeah. You know, the likes of especially Kemi Badenoch, a bit of Tom Tugendhat, fresh faces, and people were drawn to them. And it's almost like we've had this sort of prospect of something exciting and you dangled in front of us and snatched away. And being told, you're stuck with these two.
I mean, the only saving grace, I suppose, when it comes to that is that some of those characters will end up in the cabinet when the new Prime Minister is expected to be announced on the 5th of September, when that person, him or her, forms their new cabinet. Because I don't want to see the same old faces. I'm not sure many people in the country want to see the same old faces in that cabinet. So hopefully there will be some sort of fresh politics.
And but the worst possible time for this to be happening, I was thinking the other day, when you look across Europe, you've got political crisis going on in Italy, about to precipitate an economic crisis there. You've had a whole load of mess in France with Macron losing control of his government.
And that's before you get to the war in Ukraine, of course.
We're tearing ourselves apart here as well. What is going on in the West? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, it's breaking. It's all falling apart. Let us know what you think about all of that. What do you want to hear from the debate, head-to-head debate later on with Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss? Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to take a short break, but after the break, we're going to be talking about the disruption for travellers heading to mainland Europe via the Channel at Dover. It's expected to continue all summer. Some are blaming Brexit, some are blaming the French authorities. Join us after the break. We're going to be discussing all of that very shortly.
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Bright spells for many today, but also a few showers just about anywhere. And it'll be just a little bit cooler compared with the weekend. Low pressure is moving away into Scandinavia. Behind that, well, a cool north to northwesterly airflow and a couple of weather fronts just dangling in for southern parts of Scotland, northern England as well. That's where there'll be the focus for the showers. Some heavy downpours for southeast Scotland and northeast England. Perhaps the odd rumble of thunder. Elsewhere, showers more scattered. Just about anywhere could catch one, but equally there will be some bright spells. Not a great deal of sunshine, a lot of cloud around, and feeling a bit cooler compared with the weekend. Still the potential for 25 Celsius in the southeast and still feeling quite humid here, whilst it will be quite fresh for the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. And this northerly breeze will push areas of cloud and some showers southwards across central and eastern England overnight. With the cloud, for many, it's going to be a mild night, 13, 14 Celsius in the south, 11 to 12 in the north. A bright start for many on Tuesday, but still areas of cloud floating around for northern, central and southeast England. And here we'll see some showers developing once again. Also showers drifting in for Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between some sunny spells, I think the best of any dry and sunny weather will be across Wales and the southwest. 22, 23 Celsius here. 25 for London, 16, 17s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. So feeling quite fresh. And then the breeze eases finally on Tuesday night. And with light winds, with clear spells for many, a cooler night to come. Showers in the north and the east continue for a time before eventually disappearing. And Thursday and Friday, well, it's roughly similar. Bright spells and showers, and temperatures not far from average.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest, uncivilized conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 10:23 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki and Alex Phillips today on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yeah, holidaymakers are being warned that long waits at Dover will continue throughout the summer due to surging demand and more border checks.
Yes, yesterday was the third day of serious travel disruption, leaving some families waiting up to 21 hours in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Well, let's speak to Nigel Collar, a Conservative councillor for Dover District Council. Welcome to the show, Nigel. Have things improved slightly this morning? Are roads moving as you'd expect?
Well, good morning, ladies, first off. Yes, things are better this morning, but threats are that there'll be increased traffic again at the weekend. It's something we get very frequently. It can be predicted, but when one link in the chain breaks, as I believe happened on Friday, you get chaos.
I mean, what can be done to stop this happening? Because it must be utterly dreadful for the people of Dover, as well as those holidaymakers, some of them queuing for 20 hours in their cars. I mean, that's a form of torture, isn't it? Where do you point the finger of blame?
I don't blame anybody. I blame, if any blame's to go in, it needs to be done collectively and look at the whole scheme. Kent Resilience Forum do look at that, and as a member of Kent County Council, I know only too well what they're up to. But if it's all traffic through Dover is always balanced on a knife edge, even normal weekends and weekdays, it's balanced on a knife edge. And if anything goes wrong, like one link in the chain, as I said earlier, breaks, we get chaos. Now, on Friday morning, I live half a mile from the port, not on the main road, one of the main trunk roads, but on an A road that comes through the middle of the town. And I'm about half a mile from the port, as I said. And I was outside my house at 2 o'clock in the morning talking to queuing tourists. Now, when I heard somebody say, oh, the French booths weren't fully manned till 9:45, but they should have been there at 8:45. But where was the night shift? These are the sort of questions that need asking. And I have asked them, but I haven't got replies yet.
it's quite unavoidable that some people are blaming Brexit. You could say some people blame Brexit for just about anything, but is there some truth to that when it comes to this? Because, of course, this issue of the channel has been very contentious, especially when it comes to the European Union.
Well, there is a certain amount of extra work since we came out of Europe, but going back over the years, we used to have controls years ago. So it's just a matter of going back to where we were to some extent.
And what's the solution here then, Nigel? Is it a case that we need to get bigger trunk roads getting down to places like Dover and Folkestone? Because, you know, if the M20 essentially gets closed off to become a lorry park in Operation Brock, then, well, you're stuck, aren't you?
And before Brock, we had Stack, of course, which was loved by everybody except, well, I loved it, actually, because it kept Dover clear, but which is something we're working for. But the answer at the moment, what we need is investment. We need the other trunk road into Dover, the A2 dual, because it comes down to single track just as you enter Dover. And we need lorry parks, but it's always difficult to get lorry parks near the coast because you've got all the environmental issues to face. So what we really need is money put into it so that we can get things moving.
And what would you... obviously, you're a Conservative councillor, and we are seeing a head-to-head later between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. From somebody who is a Conservative, what are the most key things you would want to hear from both of the candidates today, especially in relation to things like migrant crossings across the Channel and issues of travel between the UK and the European Union?
Well, flow of people across whichever way is important, as you can see from the footage you're putting on behind the scenes here. But talking about the small boats, arrivals by small boats, now my understanding is that a person seeking asylum must claim it in the first free country they're in. So are you telling me France isn't a free country?
Well, what would you like to hear from... So Liz Truss has said she would implement or try and implement more deals, more arrangements with more African countries. Do you think that's the right thing to do? Because let's be honest, they haven't even managed to implement this plan, this Rwanda plan that they've already come up with.
No, and I can see reasons why, as no doubt you can. But, I mean, we are a small island. And being a small island, we get these people coming in possibly up to 1,000 a day. Where can we put them? Where can we house them? Where can we send the children to school? How many interpreters do you need? What about the medical, the NHS? I mean, you did an item on that earlier. How can the NHS cope with even more and more people all the time? It's very tricky. It's not only the small boats being seen coming in, usually with a border force vessel accompanying them, or indeed the lifeboat. Well, the lifeboat is a team of volunteers that's there to save lives. All right, that's probably what they're doing to some extent. But is it their prime function to go and haul in these rubber dinghies?
Yes, so neither candidate really tickling your fancy, Nige?
Sorry?
Which candidate's tickling your fancy to be the next Prime Minister?
I usually wait till the last minute to see what they're all saying.
That's good advice.
I've got obviously got first impressions, which I won't share with you, with all due respect. But I'll put it like this: I guessed who the last two would be, and I was right on that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I will hold you to that. Maybe we can speak to you again at the very last minute then. Please come back on our show again. Obviously, this issue is not going away, this issue with the Channel and with the Dover crossing. So we will have you back on again. Nigel Collar there, a Conservative councillor for Dover District Council. We can go to some views now, I believe.
Yeah, Kenneth has been in touch. He says, if we break international law in sending the planes to Rwanda, I say, so be it. The rest of Europe, especially France, ignore the law when it suits them. Let the illegal immigrants appeal from Rwanda at their own cost. Once it happens, watch the flood stop. I wish it was that simple, Kenneth, I really do.
Nobody can solve this issue has been the big takeaway, really, because how many years have the government been trying to solve the issue of immigration? God knows how many. Remember when Theresa May, I think it was promising to get illegal migration down by tens of thousands. Complete fantasy, really, wasn't it? Nobody's been able to solve it. I'm not convinced either of these two will necessarily be able to either. John says, the flow of illegal migrants across the channel is surely just that, illegal. If I break the law, I would expect to be charged and punished. Why are they not arrested and confined to a secure camp to await trial, imprisonment or deportation? Well, I suppose the answer to that is when you're an asylum seeker, you're treated as vulnerable, essentially, aren't you? You can't just be locked away like a criminal. And until such a time where your asylum case is proven, you're granted asylum or not, you have to be treated as...
It does beg the question, doesn't it, when we spent literally millions putting these people in hotels, while millions have not been used to build a new processing and detention centre, why we haven't ramped up staff in the Home Office, why we're not actually dealing with this head on, and instead coming out with these madcap schemes, which, as far as I can tell, are just performance art.
To be honest, though, I think if the government was to say, look, we're putting tens of millions into building a new processing centre, what we would hear from the left-wing media and from left-wing politicians is you're basically building a concentration camp to put migrants in, and there'd be such a furore over it. But I think there is a way to do processing centres in a very humane way that doesn't, smack of concentration camps, because that is what the government will be accused of if they try to...
Well, any government that takes too much time listening to media and opinion polls is probably not spending enough time governing the country. Efficiency is what it's all about. More people getting on with the jobs that we need done. Now, Bernard's been in Trust. He says Liz Truss has proved she keeps her word. She was a Remainer. She accepted the Brexit result and didn't try to sabotage it, unlike others. She keeps her word. Surely she'd still want us to be in the EU. I don't know. Now, he goes on to say all the jobs she has been placed with, she's done a good job of them, unlike Sunak, who has failed in everything he's done. And plus, as a Brexit supporter, he backstabbed the guy who trusted him to carry out the policies.
I wouldn't say he's failed in everything. He's succeeded in putting himself as the leading candidate to replace Boris Johnson, that's for sure, after he set up that little website several months ago, which he says he didn't set up several months ago. But anyway, I think he succeeded in a few things, which... Like over the coronavirus pandemic, he has succeeded in doing a few things there, Bernard. Well, now we're going to go...
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you for everything you're
doing
for our party and our movement and our country. And thank you, JC, as well, for those words that you started with. This is an incredible building, as JC spelt out, all to do with well-being. So these ceramic patterns on the windows are designed... Each window is different, by the way, but they're designed to give you just the right amount of shade to make you feel better, whatever the weather. All of the plants give off maximum oxygen, as JC has said, and the purification system of the air increases your cognitive function by 10 to 20%. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, the theory behind this building is that you will leave the building feeling better than when you arrived. So we're going to put that to the test this morning. I'd like to start with an observation about recent crises. Because whether it's the cost of living crisis, as Rachel has said, or recovering from the pandemic, our economy is weaker than our competitors, less resilient, brittle, and ultimately, we're all poorer for it. That's why I'm clear. Labour will fight the next election on economic growth. There is no task more central to my ambitions for Britain than making the country and its people better off. Now, tonight I think you'll hear two other candidates for Prime Minister who will also define the choice for their party to be about the economy and about growth. But what a choice it is. In one corner you have Rishi Sunak, the architect of the cost of living crisis. In the other you have Liz Truss, the latest graduate from the School of Magic Money Tree Economics. Neither of them has the answers to the economic challenges that we face. And who can be surprised? Under their watch, the average British family is £8,800 poorer than their equivalents in advanced economies. Now, that's not just a failure of policy, it's a failure of philosophy. And their leadership contest is not going to change that, because both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss rage against the dying of the Thatcherite light. They don't understand economic strength in the 21st century needs partnership. They don't believe you need state and market, business and worker, the everyday economy and the technological frontier, all contributing together if you want strong, secure and fair growth. I'm under no such illusions. Thank you. Rebooting our economy is the way we will define our task in government. And it will ask searching questions of my party and our instincts. We can't be like the Tories, clinging to the old ideas, trapped in our history. To give Britain the fresh start it needs, we need a new approach. My goal is straightforward: to maximise the contribution we all make to national prosperity. Every business, every person, every community. Now, it sounds simple, but in reality, we've failed to do this for decades. The best of British business is the best in the world, but we've geared our whole economy to delivering only for those firms. And we've been complacent about the number of jobs created which are low pay and insecure, when insecurity stops people getting on. And too few communities feel the benefit of the wealth that we create, which makes people feel that hard work is not rewarded. Now, in a nutshell, we draw our economic strength from too few places. And like a skyscraper built without foundations, that ultimately leaves us weak. And if you want evidence of this, look no further than the cost of living crisis. Everywhere I go, I hear the same stories. People scared about the future, worried that when winter comes, they'll face horrible choices about what to spend their money on. Pensioners who can't afford to turn on the heating. Families cutting back on what they buy their children. But there's one thing I hear time and time again that worries me more than anything else. And that is working people telling me hard work doesn't pay. That they're working harder and harder just to stand still. Now, that alarms me for two reasons. First, because I've been lucky enough to take a journey in my life from a working class family to head of the Crown Prosecution Service. And my fear is an economy so racked by low growth and insecurity means people from my background can't get on. Second, because, honestly, what does it say about the state of Britain when working people feel that hard work doesn't pay? What does it say about the health of our country? The health even of our democracy? It says an unwritten contract is broken. A contract that says in return for hard work, you get a fair reward. That you don't have to feel insecure about your prospects. That your contribution is respected. It's a two-way thing. A strong national economy needs everyone making the best contribution that they can, whatever their circumstances, wherever they live. But in exchange, we must make sure the contribution working people make to that national effort is fairly rewarded, that hard work does pay, that their effort is respected, that they enjoy the security they need to get on. To do all that, we need three things: growth, growth, growth. And that's why I've told the Shadow Cabinet that every policy they bring forward will be judged by the contribution it makes to growth and productivity. because everything I want for Britain comes back to this central mission. Without growth, we won't get a high-wage economy. Without growth, we can't revitalise public services. Without growth, we can't repair the broken contract, re-energise communities, or unite the country. Low-growth countries are weaker at standing up for the national interest. Low-growth economies can't support people from my background to get on. Low-growth economies can't rise to meet the challenges of the future. Challenges like climate change. And I want to be really clear on this point. We will not be distracted by the siren calls from the right or the left that say economic growth and net zero do not go together, that these two objectives are somehow in tension, or even that we should actively pursue a policy of no growth. I reject that completely. It is totally the wrong way round. A plan for net zero needs growth. A plan for growth needs net zero. This is about the future, of course. Fail to tackle climate change, and you can forget about growth. There's no bigger risk to business. Look at how our infrastructure has struggled in the last few weeks in the heat. But tackling climate change is also an opportunity to create wealth in the here and now. That's why Labour is committed to a climate investment pledge worth £28 billion until 2030. And we see that pledge as a down payment that will unlock the private investment which delivers the next generation of jobs. Because the way I see it, some nation is going to lead the world in electric vehicles, in floating offshore wind, in new hydrogen and technological developments. Why not Britain? Why not Britain? But to maximise our collective contribution, we must be clear about the kind of growth that we need. The growth I want for Britain is strong, secure and fair. Strong because it will build a foundation where every business and every person plays a role. Secure because it will produce good jobs that don't leave people feeling insecure. And fair because it will unlock the potential of every place, every community, every town and every city. This last point is so important and strikes at the structural weakness of our economy. It's not an issue of city versus town. The productivity gap between our cities and their equivalents in Europe is already too big. And too many of our towns don't have a fair chance to contribute in an economy still dominated by London and the South East. This is the hurdle we must clear. We need growth that is strong, secure and fair to re-establish that contract between people and prosperity. And the distinction I would make is this. An economy can grow and leave some of its people behind. But a nation based on contribution cannot grow in that way. But of course, all promises need a plan. Boosterism and fantasy economics are not the same as ambition. So today I want to share with you some of the plans Labour has to reboot growth and set out 5 principles that will guide my government in growing our economic contribution. These are: first, we will be financially responsible. Second, we will be distinctively British. Third, we will work in partnership with business. Fourth, we will re-energise communities and spread economic power. And fifth, we will refocus our investment on boosting productivity. Now let me take each of these in turn, starting with the most direct, financial responsibility. The risk of rising inflation could not be clearer. So we will not announce a single penny of day-to-day spending without saying how we would pay for it. We will only borrow to invest to meet the challenges of the future. That's what our climate investment pledge is all about. And we will set a target to reduce debt as an overall share of our economy. That's the responsible thing to do. And contrast that with the Conservative competition to waste more of your money. That contrast could not be starker. With me and with Rachel Reeves, you will always get sound finances, careful spending, strong, secure and fair growth. There will be no magic money tree economics with us. My second principle is that we must grow our contribution in a distinctively British way. This means two things. First, that we need resilient supply chains in sectors which are vital for British security and growth. That's why we have a strategy to buy, make and sell more in Britain. Why £3 billion of our climate investment pledge will help forge a new future for our steel industry, and why we have committed to new public procurement rules that will build up Britain's sovereign capabilities in key industries. And let me be clear, it isn't protectionist to say this, or somehow old-fashioned. Britain will always be an outward-facing, confident, trading nation. But all around the world, businesses are looking again at the resilience of their supply chains, reacting to the crises we've faced and will face in the future. Countries must do the same. Second, a British approach means we can't transplant the economic model of another country onto ours. 2 weeks ago, I met Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, and leader of our sister party, the SPD. He is showing that when levelling up is based on practical plans, not far-fetched promises, amazing things can happen. In eastern Germany right now, some of the poorest parts of the country are leading the continent in the lucrative race to develop batteries that store renewable energy. This is what can be done. And as Lisa Nandy has spelt out, just because the Tory commitment to levelling up is dead, doesn't mean the idea of levelling up is dead. Labour will take it on. But to do this in a way which isn't pure boosterism, we must be honest about British strengths. Take manufacturing. Britain has an extraordinary genius when it comes to manufacturing. We lead the world in pharmaceuticals, bioscience, aerospace. The Nissan factory in Sunderland is one of the most productive in Europe. And the COVID-19 vaccine, developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University, has saved millions of lives around the world. When I was in Airbus in Filton recently, I saw them working with 3D engineering, literally shaping components by bringing together particles and matter in a way that was unimaginable in the factory my dad used to work in. We can and should take advantage of these strengths. The road to higher growth and productivity runs right through them. But we're not Germany. The role manufacturing plays in our economy will always be different. And we have superpower strengths in universities, in creative industries, in exporting services that other countries can't compete with. The challenge in both services and manufacturing is the same. The best of British is the best in the world. And the way we stay competitive is to get more of it. More innovation, more new technology, more research and development, more unlocking the commercial power of our universities and specialising in the knowledge-rich industries of the future, and more startups. Which is why we've asked Lord Jim O'Neill to look at how we can make Britain the best country in the world to start a new business, and why we have a plan to make Brexit work that doesn't ignore the strength of our services or our universities. But an economy that grows on contribution must rest on strong foundations. Foundations that are there in every community. That is why the work that Rachel's been doing on the everyday economy is so important. Retail, education, health and care. We saw in the pandemic how much of the wealth we create depends on these sectors being strong. And for too long, industrial strategy has simply ignored them. And with that, ignored one of Britain's distinctive challenges on growth. Labour's industrial strategy will contain a plan for the everyday economy. And our New Deal for working people will introduce new employment rights to give greater security for people working in it. That brings me to my third principle, partnership. For growth that is strong, secure and fair, we must work together. We need a real partnership between state and market, business and worker, the everyday economy and the technological frontier. And it's the job of a modern industrial strategy to make sure this partnership grows our collective contribution. Not in a nostalgic way where government directs the activities of businesses. Modern industrial strategy isn't about growing the size of the state. It's about what the state does. How it supports business to innovate and to grow. Brings in the creative brilliance of our universities and applies them to the national missions that we must all contribute towards. Whether that's leading the world in artificial intelligence or applying our genius to the challenge of net zero. Here at the Spine Centre, we're in the middle of the Knowledge Quarter, innovation all around us. Just down the road at the Materials Innovation Factory, the University of Liverpool and Unilever are partnering to bridge the gap between scientific research and production, developing the new materials we need to tackle climate change or discover life-saving new medicines. We need to do so much more of this mission-driven partnership. But the government doesn't have a plan. And we have a massive job on our hands when it comes to private investment. For decades, we've trailed our competitors. In France, businesses invest around 30% more relative to GDP every year. If we could just close this gap, we would land a serious blow in our battle against low growth. Now, we know it requires public investment. That's why we have our climate investment pledge. We know it requires fair taxation, which is why we will scrap business rates and replace them with a system that levels the playing field. But we also know it requires stability. And that requires institutions that take a serious, patient, long-term view about what needs to be done. So today I can announce we will establish an Industrial Strategy Council, and we will go further by putting it on a statutory footing. It will provide advice that shapes policy in the way the Climate Change Committee does, or the Office of Budget Responsibility, a permanent part of the landscape that sets out our strategic national priorities that go beyond the political cycle, brings in the expertise of business, science and unions, holds us to account for our decisions, and builds confidence for investors that will boost long-term growth and productivity. My fourth and fifth principles are best taken together, because spreading power and raising the productivity of the economy everywhere are fundamental to growing our contribution. On spreading power, I've asked Gordon Brown to look at new forms of economic devolution, to make sure that decisions about things that drive regional growth, like skills, infrastructure, attracting investment, are all made by people with skin in the game. Labour will not attempt to run our levelling up strategy from the centre, nor will we offer it alongside a divisive argument about north versus south. city versus town. To me, they've always felt like false choices. A productive Liverpool is good for Birkenhead. A strong Dudley is good for Birmingham. And each has a shared fate in the wider battle against regional inequality. But we must also recognise that every place needs the power to grow its own economy. So our reforms will allow devolved and local government to make long-term financial decisions, to reap the rewards of investment in their economy. That way, you make sure that every city, every town, every place takes ownership of their contribution. That people and businesses with a long-term commitment to their community work together in partnership. It's what Labour is delivering in power, and it's what Labour will deliver in national government. But as well as spreading power, real levelling up also requires investment. And this is where my Labour Party will move on from the old ideas. Because the old approach focused on growing the pie in any way possible, then redistributing. But this is not strong, secure and fair growth. It leaves too many people in insecure jobs where their hard work is not fairly rewarded. Too many communities locked out from the benefits of growth, and redistribution can't repair the contract. Now, there's no point looking to the right on this. The evidence of the past decade shows they will only give us stagnation. But what we will do, what winning centre-left parties around the world have done, is to adopt a new approach to investment. An approach the US Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has called modern supply-side economics. It rests, in part, on a universal truth about social democracy. A strong economy needs strong public services. And strong public services need reform and investment. But it also rests on something more subtle. Because the investments we make now should have a laser-like focus on boosting long-term productivity across the country, not just quick wins in the southeast. Which means we must learn to focus on the supply side, on growing the collective contribution everywhere. Now, you can see this in our approach to fully funded plans for public service reform, whether it's our 8,500 new mental health professionals or our National Excellence Programme for schools that will tackle the educational inequality at the heart of low productivity. Our policies are not just an investment in the health and well-being of our communities. They are also an investment in the long-term growth and productivity of the country. There's no tension here. Just look at how many people at the moment can't work because of their health. A highly skilled and healthy nation and a fast-growing modern economy depend on each other. I never think it's too hard to identify what people want from politics. At the moment, it's probably easier than usual. People want a fresh start for Britain. They want the opportunity to get on. And above all, they want to be free from the insecurity of the cost of living crisis. The approach to growth I've set out today will challenge my party's instinct. It pushes us to care as much about growth and productivity as we have done in the past about redistribution and investment. Not to hark back to our old ideas in the face of new challenges. You will see a clear contrast between my Labour Party and the Thatcherite cosplay on display tonight. The difference between a Labour Party ready to take Britain forward and a Tory party that wants to take us back to the past. Between Labour growth and Tory stagnation. That will be the choice at the next election, and we are ready. ready to renew the contract with working people, ready to reboot our economy and end the cost of living crisis, ready to unlock the contribution of every business, every person and every community, and deliver the strong, secure and fair growth our country needs. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we've got a number of questions, starting with Erica.
Hi, BBC News. You mentioned Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak a few times then. Isn't the problem the Tory leadership contest is just drowning out you and any policies you might want to announce this summer?
No, I don't think that at all. I think what we're seeing from the leadership contest is two individuals who are part of the problem. We've had 12 years now of stagnation. They voted for every one of those 15 tax rises, and now they're trying to distance themselves as quickly as possible from it. So their answers, if you like, are too small for our country, for the challenge that we face. And that's why I've set out a strategic plan for the future. I think the change we need now is much more fundamental than a change at the top of the Tory party. We need a change of government and a fresh start for Britain. Thank you, Erica. Eleanor. Where's Eleanor? Oh, you're there. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor from the Press Association. What exactly is your position on public ownership of energy and water firms? You appear to have ruled out nationalisation, yet you still have some interest in common ownership. Can you explain what that means?
Well, look, I take a pragmatic approach rather than an ideological one. I agree with what Rachel Reeves said this morning. Having come through the pandemic, it's very important that we have very, very clear priorities. And that's why we've set out fiscal rules already as an opposition. Rachel did that at conference last year. That's way ahead of the general election, setting out our priorities. And my priority, as I hope is obvious from this morning, is growth. The mission of the next Labour government will be growth. That partnership with business is where I see that growth coming from. So my approach here is pragmatic, not ideological. My mission is growth. And underpinning that mission is a partnership arrangement with business where the mission is set by an incoming Labour government and we empower business to work with us on delivering on that mission. Thank you, Eleanor. I think I've got Mark from The Guardian.
Well, you heard it. That was Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, setting out his agenda, really, for what, I suppose, an economy under Labour would look like. Lots to get stuck into. He set out a 5-point plan, really. His vision could be summarised in a 5-point plan. But the best person to go to tell you about all of that is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who joins us live right now in the studio. Tom, summarise what Sir Keir Starmer has just said there and how significant it is.
In a word, it's growth. It's interesting listening to Sir Keir Starmer there. If you closed your eyes, you could have been listening to something that Liz Truss might have been saying for the last few weeks. The real focus of the Labour Party now seems to be not just on the redistributive element that everyone knows is part of Labour's philosophy, but also about growing the size of the economy. And this is a really crucial juncture now for the Labour Party to take, to recognise it's not just enough to share out a pie if that pie is relatively small. If you grow that pie and then share it out, the wealth that everyone has is so much bigger. I think some people might critique what Keir Starmer has been saying for its lack of clear detail, although it's hard to get into a lot of detail about the productivity reforms you might pursue in a speech that lasts around half an hour or so. But clearly the sense of direction here is an interesting one, and it picks up on this idea that is growing in economic circles around the UK, that really the UK could be doing a lot better when it comes to economic growth, that there's actually quite a lot of low-hanging fruit that we could pick that is sort of holding our country back right now in terms of the growth rate we could have. And it's interesting looking at the difference between, say, the 1% or indeed 0% growth we're expected next year, the conglomeration effects of even doubling that to 2% growth or 3% growth, it's huge. The amount of extra money that you then have to play with. I think the big question will be, now that it seems that the Labour Party is on board with economic growth is a good thing, which under Jeremy Corbyn there was a lot of questioning as to whether or not he did believe in economic growth. A lot of his thinkers and people around the Corbyn side of the Labour Party were saying, well, actually, economic growth could be a problem rather than a solution. Now the Labour Party clearly saying that growth is important. They'll fight the next election, they say now, on growth. I think the question very much now will turn to how they deliver it.
I'm a bit confused as to which party he'll be standing for in the next election.
He's Checkers to get that speech.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds like he's, standing to be a Tory leader, not the next Labour leader, Prime Minister. He seems to have moved considerably right compared to what we're used to from Labour over the last couple of years.
I think a lot of people would have heard a lot of Tony Blair, perhaps, in that speech. He spoke, yes, about growing the economy, but also about the sort of public sector involvement. And his Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, got into a bit of a mess this morning when on the radio she said that Labour would not nationalise the railways, for example. She then backtracked on that about an hour later, saying that actually rail nationalisation will still be on the table under a Labour government, which a lot of people would raise an eyebrow to as whether this is actually a very pro-business, pro-growth agenda. I think the detail here really does matter. And I suppose it's easy for politicians to say we want to grow the economy, but to get into exactly how that will be done, which regulations they'll lift, how they will boost productivity, that's a crucial question. But it's interesting looking at the Blairite thread of this speech, talking about the public-private partnerships, talking about government working with business. Now, some people might raise an eyebrow at that. We all remember the public-private partnerships that built some hospitals with dubious ways of funding them that ended up costing the taxpayer more later on. However, in other areas, public-private partnerships clearly have worked very well. So I think very much the broad brushstrokes of this speech are saying things that many people will be wanting to hear, that growth is something that is incredibly important to the United Kingdom and, frankly, that we haven't had enough of since 2008. But when it comes to how that will be delivered, I think the Labour Party still has more questions to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Three-word motto there, Union flag lectern. I mean, what's he gone to? Political speeches for you?
I mean, the five points, to be concise, that he said he would characterise his leadership, the next Labour government, would be financial responsibility. Sounds a bit Tory. Distinctively British. Sounds a bit Tory. A partnership between state and market. Not quite Tory, but the fact he's putting market up there with the state, bit moving to the right. Spreading power, he alluded to levelling up.
Lots of levelling up in that.
And refocusing investment on boosting productivity. Again, he seems to have taken from the playbook of the 2019.
I think he just wants to be on that ballot paper, doesn't he?
Yeah, maybe he does. Join us in just a second. We're going to be digesting all of that for the next hour. Yes, good morning. It's 11:08 and you're with To The Point here on GB News. We're live on your TV, radio and online. Now to our top story. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will go head-to-head in a leadership debate tonight as the Conservative leadership election turns increasingly bitter.
Yeah, on Sunday, the two clashed over immigration, with both launching plans to protect the UK's borders.
Yes, well, Liz Truss promised to sign more Rwanda-style schemes with African countries, whilst Rishi Sunak vowed to cap the number of migrants able to enter the UK.
Well, the focus today is expected to be on the NHS after damning reports revealed the health service is facing its worst ever staffing crisis.
Yes, well, with a large part of the focus tonight being on immigration, we're pleased to be joined by Stephen Wolfe, who's the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Good morning.
Good morning.
Stephen. We spoke to Joe Twyman from Delta Poll a bit earlier, and he said, yes, cost of living is up there, understandably, in terms of what voters want to be hearing from politicians, but immigration is still a key issue. What do you think the new Tory leader should focus on when it comes to that?
Well, first and foremost, he should be listening to those people who would be voting for him, in particular the North, the Midlands, the coastal areas, who have real deep concerns about the mass migration that continues and has increased under this government. Our research will show that last year alone there were 55,000 asylum applications, much more than most people are talking about. And that's using government figures. 865,000 since 2001. And so any of those leaders, if they want to become the Prime Minister, needs to convince their own constituents, the Tory member voters, who are very keen to see migration reduced, and those voters in those key areas. Because if they fail to do so, that red wall will come tumbling down.
We've had a Conservative government for the best part of 15 years now, and repeatedly they promise that they're going to cut the figures. They don't. Do you think that they're resorting now to sort of almost jingoistic plans with talking about opening up the Rwanda scheme to more countries before a plane has even taken off, and they're not talking about the real sort of, putting meat on the bones of what needs to happen, whether it's building new detention centres, ramping up the amount of staff at the Home Office?
They're clearly concerned, and they can clearly understand that the public have been watching them over the past 15 years and still see the numbers very, very high. They demanded in Brexit that we take back control of our borders. We clearly haven't. They know it, and everybody was worried about it. What you can see, though, very clearly between the two different styles, that of Sunak's 10-point policies and those of the extending Rwanda scale of Liz Truss, is a clear division between them. For first and foremost, I read the 10 points by Rishi Sunak, and it's very clear that there are almost Liberal Democrat, Labour Party influences within that. For one, and the most important one, you cannot control the borders in this country whilst we still are members of the European Courts of Human Rights and we have the Human Rights Act. And yet, Rishi Sunak, point number one, says we'll only try and amend issues of conflict between the ECHR and the General Convention on Migration. And so what we've got here is a person who's not willing to take the very important step of removing ourselves from the ECHR.
I want to ask you about some statistics that I find people like to ignore or are inconvenient to some of the people who are against migration, and obviously particularly in terms of illegal immigration. 81% of people who claim asylum are granted a refugee status. Now, if by the government's own sort of processes and procedures, they consider 8 in 10 people who are claiming asylum to be genuine refugees, then what does that mean in terms of our duty of care to some of these people? Because in theory, then, 8 in 10 people crossing the channel are genuine refugees. And you hear a lot, well, these people aren't genuine refugees, but by the government's own figures, the vast majority are.
Well, actually, that number restricts itself to a very limited period. On average, it's around 66% of those. It's still high, but there's two things that come from that. First of all, if we look at the numbers over the past few years, we're averaging around 15,000 asylum applicants who have failed. Have they been removed? Have they been deported? Absolutely not. So that is a big issue. For those that are here, yes, I've argued many, many times that we need to increase the procedures to smooth the process so that we can get to find out those who are genuine asylum seekers. In the future, consider how we bring them back into the economy and make them work. But the most important part is we need to really assess the criteria. And one of those criteria, which Rishi Sunak refers to, is how the ECHR extends the definition to allow more people to actually pass as genuine asylum and refugees. If we take that out, those numbers would drop.
Do you think that we need to be looking at a radical overhaul of the way that we treat people who come to this country and are having their applications processed? Should we be considering, for example, offering them work on a basic salary?
Well, I think that's always what will happen to them anyway. Once they get full rights to remain here, part of the convention is that they are unable to work in the future. And that is something that we will need to consider. There are two things that I've argued very strongly over the past few years, and I'm now working with people in Turkey who have a huge issue, in Hungary, in the United States, is the need for an international conference that reviews this global mass migration issue and review the convention rights once more, because there are lots of countries out there who are saying we are also getting mass migration and it's not working for us. So we need to look at how it's distributed and what the rules and the legislation should reflect that. And when that comes in, we need to also consider how we look at people who have arrived here too, because many of them are actually not genuine asylum seekers, and those should be removed. But those who are, how do we move their processes forward so that they become genuine people within the country who love this country, like so many of us who've adopted, like my some members of my own family did so in the past.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you ever so much.
My pleasure.
Fantastic
Thank
to have
you.
you in here. Stephen Wolfe.
Yes. Well, after the break, the disruption facing holiday makers heading to mainland Europe via Dover and Kent are expected to continue all summer. Sadly, we'll be discussing why this is after the weather.
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Bright spells for many today, but also a few showers just about anywhere, and it'll be just a little bit cooler compared with the weekend. Low pressure is moving away into Scandinavia. Behind that, well, a cool north to northwesterly airflow and a couple of weather fronts just dangling in for southern parts of Scotland, northern England as well. That's where there'll be the focus for the showers. Some heavy downpours for southeast Scotland and northeast England. Perhaps the odd rumble of thunder. Elsewhere, showers more scattered. Just about anywhere could catch one, but equally there will be some bright spells. Not a great deal of sunshine, a lot of cloud around, and feeling a bit cooler compared with the weekend. Still the potential for 25 Celsius in the southeast and still feeling quite humid here, whilst it will be quite fresh for the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. And this northerly breeze will push areas of cloud and some showers southwards across central and eastern England overnight. With the cloud, for many, it's going to be a mild night, 13, 14 Celsius in the south, 11 to 12 in the north. A bright start for many on Tuesday, but still areas of cloud floating around for northern, central and southeast England. And here we'll see some showers developing once again. Also showers drifting in for Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between some sunny spells, I think the best of any dry and sunny weather will be across Wales and the southwest. 22, 23 Celsius here, 25 for London, 16, 17s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. So feeling quite fresh. And then the breeze eases finally on Tuesday night. And with light winds, with clear spells for many, a cooler night to come. Showers in the north and the east continue for a time before eventually disappearing. And Thursday and Friday, well, it's roughly similar. Bright spells and showers and temperatures not far from average.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest, uncivilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:20 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Alex Phillips on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
In a minute, we'll be looking into the Dover travel chaos causing holiday hell. But first, our Mercy gives her views on how we don't talk enough about diversity of class in politics. Hit it, Em.
Well, last week on this programme, I spoke about the excessive abundance of Oxford graduates in the top ranks of our politicians. Let's have a little recap. 2 of the 55 Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom have gone to just 2 universities, Oxford and Cambridge, you guessed it. Now, I'm sure you knew it was pretty high, but that's very high. That's there 75%. Over half of Prime Ministers we've had were educated at just one of those universities, Oxford. In fact, one single college of the 45 colleges that make up the University of Oxford has produced a quarter, 1 in 4, of all Prime Ministers. Well, as I said then, I have absolutely nothing against clever kids being sent off to Oxford. I want to make that clear, or Cambridge, in fact. I intend to do the same with my kids, actually, unapologetically. In fact, I consider myself a ruthless, or merciless, if you will, defender of meritocracy. Because if you accept that the most intelligent people do deserve to go to the top schools and universities, and I do, then you must also accept that those same people will go on to dominate the top professions in every field. People who have a higher IQ are more intellectually sophisticated, more adept at understanding and processing complex information, and more competitive. Those people will acquire more power in a capitalist marketplace. Like it or not, them's the rules. I'm okay with those rules, actually, because while I'm not a communist and I don't think equality of outcome is either desirable nor achievable. But here's my caveat. In the one profession that is solely based on being a representative of the people, surely those rules don't quite work. If the very raison d'etre of a constituency MP is to represent his or her people, what good is a degree certificate from Oxford or Cambridge? I mean, great, you can recite Greek poetry and critique Roman philosophy. Yes, you know all the tips and tricks to fit right into a room full of boarding school educated bankers. But can you make a tenner stretch to the end of the week with 3 mouths to feed? Have you ever seen an empty fridge in your life? Do you even know how much a loaf of bread is, mate? Why am I bringing this up again? Well, a new report by think tank the Institute for Public Policy Research has found that only about 1% of Conservative Party MPs came from a working class background. 1%. That's equivalent to just 3 Tory MPs out of the current lot. And Labour is better, but not too much better. In fact, according to this new research, the proportion of Labour MPs from working class backgrounds has more than halved since the mid-1980s. Just 7% now of all our MPs in our parliament are deemed working class, according to these figures. That's compared to 34% of working-age adults who are working class. In other words, if our parliament was to be representative of the country in terms of class, the number of working class MPs, in theory, would need to increase 5-fold. Look, we bang on and on about increasing diversity. It's diversity this, inclusion that. And fine, great, over a third of MPs are now women, an all-time high. 10% of MPs are ethnic minority. Fantastic. Have a star sticker, give yourself a pat on the back. But what's the point of having someone who looks like you on the outside if they are otherwise completely alien? At a time when Britain is breaking before our eyes, when our politics is so out of touch, I don't care what those in power look like. Look, the place I call home, the neighbourhood I live in, is in the top 20% of the most deprived neighbourhoods in the UK. Now, I'm lucky enough to be one of the few in my hometown who are not struggling, but too many people I know are. And this is the same story all over the country. How many MPs truly understand or relate to the plight of the people they represent? Look, I don't know about you, but I would gladly take a working class MP any day for my constituency, no matter what the sex is, no matter what the colour is.
Points then. You know, I agree with you on a lot of it, but the question is, how do we get people into these sorts of positions? It strikes me politics is the one profession where you don't have a CV, you don't need qualifications to do it. It should be the one profession where more people get access to it. Is it because parties parachute people into constituencies that aren't theirs? Is it because the focus hasn't been on this? Or is it because there's still snobbery? I mean, look at the criticism Angela Rayner got for her grammar and vocabulary.
Yeah, but she has called top Tory scum, to be fair. That's
it's some interesting vocabulary.
Yes, I don't think that's acceptable vocabulary at all. But do you know what's funny? Characters like Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner, very obviously from a working class background, I actually really like those sorts of politicians. Whether I agree with their policies is a different question, but what I do feel is that they have the power to relate to and understand what ordinary people are going through, especially in times where there's a cost of living crisis. When I see politicians who and there's many of them, especially in the Tory party, who went to boarding school and who went to Oxford and did PPE like the rest of them, then went into banking, I just do think, how can you really understand what poor people are going through? Yes, you can empathise, but we need people who actually understand. I really do think that we do.
Yeah, interesting. So the polls have flipped as well. I mean, when you look a lot more working class people backing Conservatives and people like Boris Johnson, who was an Etonian, of course.
Yes, and an Oxfordonian. What is Oxon? I don't know.
Oxfordonian, Oxford grad.
Yes,
Oxford grad.
Now, let's move on. A story, both Tory leadership candidates and, in fact, all our MPs will be keeping an eye on. Holidaymakers are being warned that long waits at Dover will continue throughout the summer. This is due to surging demand and more border checks.
Yeah, yesterday saw a third day of serious travel disruption that left some families waiting up to 21 hours in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Wow, well, Henry Bolton is the former leader of UKIP and a former soldier and police officer with expertise in border control, and he joins us in the studio. Hello, thanks for coming in. Lots of people are blaming Brexit. What's your reaction to that?
Aren't they? Yeah. Look, this is not Brexit. To be clear, yes, because of Brexit, French, what they call frontier police at Dover, have to do a couple of extra things. For example, they have to check, or they should ask you how much money you've got when you're planning to return, and they should stamp your passport. But let's be very, very clear. Since 2003, French border policemen at Dover have had the task of checking passports of every passenger going through the terminal, so towards France. There has been no change in that. A little bit of extra time is taken, that's true. But for that reason, the Port of Dover doubled the number of passport booths for the French police at Dover to account for that additional time and therefore to avoid a blockage in the flow. What happened 2-3 days ago? French police turned up in the morning for their shift with enough people to staff 4 of the 12 passport booths. So they were at 33% staffing at Dover. No wonder on one of the busiest days of the year there was a delay. Now, that's not down to Brexit, not at all. That said, if we rewind back to the referendum, so the start of the sort of real defined moment of Brexit, on that day or the next morning, the Cabinet should have sat down and started thinking, right, what do we need to do to plan and prepare for this? I've always said the risk in leaving of Brexit was not in leaving the European Union, it was in having a government that was either too negligent or too incompetent to actually plan and prepare for it properly. And that, to a large extent, is what we've seen. And I heard your monologue just now, and I would agree. But the other thing that we need out of our politicians in Westminster is the ability to see the big picture, think strategically, as well as at the local level and their constituent level, so that they can actually deliver leadership, so that they can govern in a strategic manner. We have got a total absence of that amongst all our politicians, regardless of their political party. We see it in the NHS, we see it in education, we see it in transport, and transport has a direct impact on what's happening down in Dover at the moment, and the mess that's there in terms of the traffic flow. They're busy using the M20, not the M2. The truck stops haven't been properly worked out or organised. That's Department for Transport. It's not borders, but it has an impact. Where is the person who is connecting the dots? There is nobody. And that's a major flaw. So, no, it's not down to Brexit, but there have been significant failures both in the May government and in the Johnson government in this regard. And there have also been big failures on the French part. And don't forget that it's very, very convenient at this moment when we're going through a Conservative Party leadership contest, and all of this is at the forefront, and there's an opportunity for those people who passionately believe we should never have left the European Union and should indeed re-enter it, the European Union. There's people like Guy Verhofstadt in Brussels and so on, are very passionate at the moment, encouraging the Remainers back here to believe that this is all down to Brexit. It is not, but this is a political opportunity for those Remainers, both in Brussels and here in the UK, to start messaging that it's all down to Brexit. It is not. Do your homework, have a look at the staffing figures for the French police and ask yourself whether French police staffing numbers are as a result of Brexit.
We are about to get a new Prime Minister. It's going to be Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. We know that much. And you're talking about people not having much long-term planning when it comes to governance. 15 years of Conservative government and woeful investment in infrastructure, constant problems with the NHS, illegal immigration not being tackled. Out of those two, do you believe either of them represents the fresh start that they promise and a real change in our country's fortunes?
No, I don't. I mean, you know, best of a bad bunch is how I would express it. The quality of our politicians in Westminster is appalling when we look at this. There is no depth of experience at the strategic level. And I'm sorry, but, you know, to those people who say, well, if you can run a team of 6 people, you can run a cabinet, that is not correct. There is a whole different... There are lots of people who get promoted beyond their capacity. Doesn't mean to say they're not extremely good at what they do at a certain level, but sometimes there's not the...
You're not talking about Nadine Dorries, are you? Joking.
That's going off track a little bit. but yeah, there's a serious problem in the lack of capacity and acumen at the national level amongst all our politicians. So when you get a political party that selects candidates because they tick the right box in some sort of way, or they're connected to the right people, but they're not actually that competent or capable, they get into Parliament. When you then have to form a cabinet, selecting from that pool, your cabinet's going to be a reflection of that poor quality of pool. You're going to have poor cabinet ministers. And then when you come to select a prime minister or a leader of a party, you've got the same problem. You know, if we look at somebody like, many of us like to bring him up, but Churchill would never have got into Parliament now. Why? Because he was bloody awkward to manage. Okay? But political parties now don't want leaders. They want people who will toe the party line, who are not outward-going enough and thinking outside the box enough to actually create waves and create change and drive forward. They're not leaders. They're followers. And that's the problem. So,
Henry, thank you ever so much. Thank you for coming into the studios as well. Lots of interesting thoughts there, Henry
And
Bolton.
great tie as well,
Thank you
might
very
I
much.
add. Yes. Thank you. Well, coming up, after agreeing to let Ukraine export grain, Russia then turned around and bombed its port. The strike on Odessa undermines the deal to ease the global food crisis. That's something we're going to be discussing in further detail after the break. But before that, here's your morning headlines.
It is 11:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. MPs warn the greatest staffing crisis in NHS history is creating a serious risk to patient safety. The Health and Social Care Committee says research shows the health service is short of 12,000 doctors and 50,000 nurses and midwives. It also warns the government has no decisive strategy to help. An independent review has found Cricket Scotland to be institutionally racist. The report by the consultancy firm Plan for Sport cites over 440 examples and failings in 29 out of 31 indicators. Cricket Scotland's entire board resigned before the report's publication, saying it would allow new structures to be created to implement its recommendations. The final two candidates to become Prime Minister will face their first televised head-to-head debate tonight. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been trading blows over immigration, China and tax cuts over the weekend. The Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are vowing to toughen controls on migration. Ferry passengers travelling to France are being advised to arrive at least 2 hours before their scheduled departure. Ferry operator DFDS says the extra time's needed to complete all border control checks with queues of around an hour. It comes after the AA warned holidaymakers they could face ongoing travel delays at Dover and Folkestone. A bird flu outbreak on one of the UK's most important habitats is being described as an unprecedented wildlife tragedy. The National Trust confirmed that over 3,000 seabirds have now died on the Farne Islands off the coast of Northumberland. Rangers believe the outbreak could potentially kill tens of thousands of seabirds. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.205 and €1.177. The price of gold currently stands at £1,438.50 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 11:38 and this is To The Point with Alex Phillips and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and on radio this morning.
Yes, now, just days after Russia reached a deal to protect grain exports to tackle international food shortages, the country bombed a key Ukrainian port, pushing that food security agreement into much uncertainty.
Yeah, the deal was signed last week, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky described the attack as barbarism and said Russia could not be trusted to implement the deal. Since the invasion, Russia has blocked Ukrainian ports, trapping tens of millions of tons of grain and disrupting shipments.
Yes, well, joining us now is Peter Obukov, member of Odessa City Council. Thanks for speaking to us today. Why do you think this has happened? I mean, it seems to be a complete and utter disregarding of the deal that was signed to protect that food security.
Good morning. I think that is the only way Russians could manage deals. They could only show their force, their strength. They could not respect others part of the deal. So we should handle this. We can answer on this only with weapons, only with more attacks on the Donbass and on the south of Ukraine. So, and that is a huge question to Turkey, which also signed this deal, and there should be guarantees of this deal.
Normal times, what sort of exportation is there from Odessa when it comes to getting grain out around the world? It's a huge quantity, isn't it? And so many countries depend on it.
There are more than 20 million tons of grain, which is able to feed 400 million people. Most of them are in Africa and China. So Putin uses these people like hostages, and he will use any points when he can push on the Western world and to make them stop support of Ukraine. But that strategy would fail.
How is it to try and get the grain out of the port? My understanding is the sea is sort of littered with marine mines that could make the passage for normal ships incredibly dangerous. And then, of course, there are potentially ongoing attacks on Odessa, like the ones recently carried out.
Yes, we have a lot of sea mines, and some of them already killed some of people who tried to swim in the sea, which is prohibited. They broke this rule and they died. But I think that is possible to make this moving of ships with support of some military travelers. So that is possible if Russia would not attack it by missiles.
And when you heard the news about this deal being done, you mentioned Turkey earlier and their importance in controlling shipping through places like the Black Sea. Were you convinced that finally you'd be able to export that grain out to the 400 million people who could soon be faced with being on the brink of famine if they don't get that food? Or were you sceptical from the get-go?
That would also be very profitable to Ukraine. We have this grain for an amount of $10 billion. But I was skeptical from the first day. I have read this deal, and this deal, it has no guarantees. It's just written that parts are guaranteeing that they will not attack, but there are any punishment. If it would be written, for example, that for any attack Russia would pay money, or it would deposit money to United Nations and will get it back after the deal ends if there are no attacks. Or, for example, if Turkey in case of attack, Turkey will prohibit for Russian airplanes to get inside Turkish airspace and stop flights from Turkey to Russia. That would be punishment. But this deal has no punishment for breaking it, so I haven't believed, and my beliefs was proved after one day just.
And just very finally, I wanted to ask, obviously, you'll be aware that Boris Johnson will be leaving his post, so to speak, and we will have a new Prime Minister in September. Now, Boris Johnson has obviously been incredibly popular in Ukraine. How are Ukrainians feeling at the moment about the fact that, this Boris that they've come to know and love will no longer be the UK Prime Minister in a few weeks?
Yes, I've heard that he will visit Ukraine in the third time since the invasion, and I believe that he could visit Odessa. He had such a plans last month. Yes, we are a little bit worried about who will be next PM in United Kingdom, but as I have spoken with British people, any candidate for PM would be a Ukraine supporter. And I don't know Rishi Sunak. I haven't followed him, but I know that Liz Truss is very hard on Russia.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Peter Obukov there, who's a member of Odessa City Council. Thank you. We'll have you on again, I'm sure.
Well, now, the World Health Organization has declared that monkeypox is now a global public health emergency of international concern.
Yes, well, that declaration is the strongest call to action the agency can make, with a warning of a moderate to high risk and clear risk of further international spread. So do we have the staffing capacity to deal with a potential outbreak?
Well, former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt, who chairs the Commons Health and Social Care Select Committee, produced a report stating tackling the shortage must be a top priority for the new Prime Minister when the takeover is complete.
Yes, well, the report found England is now short of 12,000 hospital doctors and more than 50,000 nurses and midwives.
Well, joining us now to discuss all of that, monkeypox and NHS shortages, is Dr Claire Craig. And talking us through the NHS staffing crisis is Dr Lawrence Buckman. Both, thank you a lot for coming on the programme. Starting with you, Claire, and focusing on monkeypox. You know, the last time we heard the World Health Organization say something was of international concern, it was regarding COVID. But what differences are there? I mean, could we be facing some sort of monkeypox pandemic, or is the spread significantly different from that of coronavirus?
It's completely different, and really, frankly, people shouldn't be worried about monkeypox in any way at all. The difference primarily is that COVID spreads through the air, and monkeypox is spread through gay sex. So the number of people who are at risk is really that community, not everybody. And what we should be really, really scared about isn't the disease at all. It's what's happening within the WHO in terms of a power grab. So this decision to call it a public health emergency was taken unilaterally by the Director General, overruling his emergency committee. And that gives him really ridiculous amounts of power, because the WHO constitution has been set up in such a way that the director can have power over nation states without people being able to opt out, because it was done by people who never thought about it being used in a negative way. It was always thought to be, only done by good people.
I mean, Claire, I'm going to pick up on what you said about the spread of monkeypox within a particular community. The fact is, actually, it can spread beyond that community. That is not the primary form of transmission. That may be where the outbreak is. So going back to that particular point there, I mean, there really does need to be some degree of warning, surely, to a general public when we're seeing that this is now affecting multiple countries around the world.
So you're wrong about how it spreads. It's spread through gay sex, and there have been instances where patients have given it to healthcare workers caring for them, but beyond that, there's no evidence of it spreading outside of gay sex.
Well, let's bring Dr. Lawrence in. Dr. Lawrence, what do you make of that? Because it is somewhat of a contentious issue, and maybe it's because people don't want to be seen to be demonising gay men. But we do need very clear public health information based on facts. From your estimation, what are the facts around the spread of monkeypox?
Well, I'm a GP. I'm not an expert on viral spread of other illnesses, but my reading of the subject suggests that it's skin-to-skin contact rather than air spread, and therefore it seems a rather strange choice to make it a global health emergency. I can see why it's important, and you don't want it to spread. And clearly, if there are people who are more at risk, which I would have thought was anyone who had a lot of skin-to-skin contact, which is not just the prerogative of the gay community, I'd have thought they need to be vaccinated. I'm not really arguing with my colleague, as I'm not an expert in this area, but it seems to me that some of the information coming out of the World Health Organization has been a little overexcitable.
And why do you think that is, Dr. Lawrence? Because there are people who, after COVID, are increasingly concerned about the amount of power the World Health Organization wields and how that might impact on people's freedoms when it comes to future health crises.
I'm not greatly exercised by their freedom. I'm more concerned about protecting people's health. But I'm not sure that a move by one member of the World Health Organization, albeit the boss, against other colleagues in the World Health Organization, I'm not sure that that conveys anything other than a display of power rather than a serious concern. COVID kills people. Monkeypox, as far as my understanding goes, kills exceedingly few people. It can disable people, and it certainly isn't a nice thing to have. And it would be unpleasant if it spread amongst those whose immunity was less good.
Let's talk now about the NHS shortages. I mean, I wonder when the last time was the NHS didn't have shortages, when it wasn't buckling under pressure. It seems to be an ongoing narrative. Why is it that successive governments haven't dealt with this? What is it that the NHS needs? I mean, how is your GP surgery faring at the moment? Are you fully staffed?
Most GP surgeries are fully staffed, not with full-time GPs, of course, because that's gone out of fashion now. But there are sufficient doctors just about to cope with the workload, but it takes very little to push practices over the edge, and many practices are struggling to recruit. This was a crisis that we've been predicting for many years. 20 years ago, I and many others were saying this is going to come. It takes 10 to 20 years to train a doctor, certainly 20 years to train somebody who can work independently, and at least 10 years to train an independent nurse. And this has been an accident waiting to happen. It was obvious years ago. There have been several changes of government since then. Nobody has done anything. It isn't about money. It's about number of people working in the health service. And it's obvious there are not enough, and there will not be enough for the mid-future.
And Dr. Claire, you're a diagnostic pathologist, and one key issue people have had an issue with recently is getting conditions diagnosed and getting them diagnosed early before it's too late, before they become more acute. Are we set to see more of that with these figures coming out about the NHS? Do you think we're going to see more of people basically not being diagnosed early enough and the NHS essentially hindering their chances of recovery by not treating them soon enough?
I think what we're going to see is that patients who would have been diagnosed in that period when they weren't accessing healthcare are going to start presenting with later cancers. So when screening was stopped, we would have missed people who had cancer, and they're going to start coming through the system at some point soon, yeah.
And what do you think that the problem is, why the NHS is still massively understaffed? At one point, we were having to bring in a lot of foreign medics to help bolster our own ranks. Is it because the NHS is pretty bad at training and then retaining people? Is it due to caps on the number of people going to medical school? Or is it because actually, frankly, working in the NHS is seen as a pretty dire lifestyle choice these days?
Yeah, both of those.
I think there's definitely a problem with retention.
Problem with retention. Go on, did you want to carry on, Dr. Claire? Then we can go to Dr. Lawrence.
I mean, so there was a story just recently in the heat wave when nurses weren't allowed to have their own water supply at their nurses' station. And you think, well, you know, there are things you can do to keep your staff, and there are things you can do to almost deliberately cause people to leave. And it seems that we do more of the latter.
Yeah, and Lawrence, back to you, because we were talking about the problem with training and retaining and the fact that people might not be attracted to spending tens of thousands of pounds at medical school to then do a job where you're overworked, over-exercised and under-resourced.
It's true that money would sweeten the pill, but actually I'd be just as knackered if you double my pay. There are not enough people doing the work in a situation where they feel rewarded. And I don't mean by money, I mean by support. The amount of bullying and really quite unnecessary bureaucracy that happens in the health service that makes it very difficult for people to do their jobs, that has gone on for many, many years, and it's got worse and worse. And younger doctors now say, why should I do this? I can just work part-time and I'll earn a reasonable amount of money, not as much as if I work full-time, and I won't have to put up with this. And more doctors don't want to be consultants or GPs. They want to be locums or have what they call portfolio careers, doing one thing and another thing, in order that their income stays up, but they don't have to put up with the pressure of having to deliver constantly against deadlines that very often are set politically rather than because it's an appropriate clinical deadline. The NHS doesn't run at the moment for the benefit of patients or indeed its staff. It's run as the front end of the Department of Health. And actually, however distant you make it, that has been the problem for many years. And it's just got worse as governments of both stripes have found unable to recruit and retain those people who they have because they don't value them enough.
Well, both of you, thank you so much for joining us for that discussion. Dr. Claire Craig there, a pathologist, and NHS doctor, Dr. Lawrence Buckman. Are you Are you still in the NHS, Dr. Lawrence, or you? Yes, you are still. Okay.
But I'm an employee now rather than a partner.
Okay, great. Well, there you go. Thank you both for joining us. Well, let's finish off the programme with some of your views. Lots of them have been coming in.
Yeah, Neil from Worcester has been talking about all the things these candidates in the race to get the keys to number 10 should be discussing. He says, I want to know what radical changes to illegal crossings and the NHS backlog the candidates will put in place if they become PM. Tweaking policy is not enough.
Yeah, more of the same doesn't seem to be the solution, really, does it? Tommy agrees. He says, I want to hear one of the two say it as it is. On immigration, the only way to competently tackle the issue is by changing the laws and removing ourselves from international agreements that are against our nation's security. Tommy is for Liz Truss. He thinks she's a doer. And that is her slogan, isn't it?
That is a USP, isn't it?
Deliver,
yeah.
I think, is her slogan.
I was instantly drawn to this one by Becca, who says, dear to the point, brilliant partnership with Mercy and Alex. Thank you, GB News. Great interaction, interesting topics and sound analysis. The dream team.
Is that Becca who works here?
I think it's Becca on digital, right?
Well,
Thanks, Becca.
thank you so much for getting in touch today. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. That is it from us here at To The Point. You're back tomorrow.
I am back tomorrow. Also back at 2 o'clock on my own show.
Yeah, absolutely. But don't go away, because up next is The Briefing, this time with Esther McVeigh. See you tomorrow.
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Bright spells for many today, but also a few showers just about anywhere, and it'll be just a little bit cooler compared with the weekend. Low pressure is moving away into Scandinavia. Behind that, well, a cool north to northwesterly airflow and a couple of weather fronts just dangling in for southern parts of Scotland, northern England as well. That's where there'll be the focus for the showers. Some heavy downpours for southeast Scotland and northeast England. Perhaps the odd rumble of thunder. Elsewhere, showers more scattered. Just about anywhere could catch one, but equally there will be some bright spells. Not a great deal of sunshine, a lot of cloud around, and feeling a bit cooler compared with the weekend. Still the potential for 25 Celsius in the southeast and still feeling quite humid here, whilst it will be quite fresh for the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. And this northerly breeze will push areas of cloud and some showers southwards across central and eastern England overnight. With the cloud, for many, it's going to be a mild night, 13, 14 Celsius in the south, 11 to 12 in the north. A bright start for many on Tuesday, but still areas of cloud floating around for northern, central and southeast England. And here we'll see some showers developing once again. Also showers drifting in for Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between some sunny spells, I think the best of any dry and sunny weather will be across Wales and the southwest. 22, 23 Celsius here. 25 for London, 16, 17s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. So feeling quite fresh. And then the breeze eases finally on Tuesday night. And with light winds, with clear spells for many, a cooler night to come. Showers in the north and the east continue for a time before eventually disappearing. And Thursday and Friday, well, it's roughly similar. Bright spells and showers and temperatures not far from average.